All right, let's get into it. So I know I made a video beforehand, but I thought it would actually be smarter to keep it into three separate videos. So one for the Fifa Editor tool, one for Blender, and one for Photoshop, just so I can kind of show you some of the ways that modders will change various aspects about uniforms and also specifically the helmet. So essentially what we want to do is take the files out of the game, edit them, and then import them back into the game. You cannot add or remove files from the game. You can only replace. So say for example, if a team has five different uniforms, like five different jerseys, you can't add more jerseys than you already have, but you can change one of those five. So what I tend to do is try and find jerseys that perhaps you wouldn't be interested in using. So, for example, like if you've got like the jerseys from the 60s and 70s, like the throwback eras, like there might be ones that you don't use, and they're essentially expendable. When you open up Fifa Editor tool for the first time and load up Madden, you will get all these various different file paths, and it's for us to figure out which one of these file paths has our data in it. For uniform modding, you want to use the terms in the search EBX files. You want to use the terms either helmet, jersey, pants, or socks. I'll show you the numbers and fonts and how we change those as well. I tend to do it by team name because it just makes it a lot easier to export out. So if, for example, we wanted to look at jerseys, right? I know from doing it before that if you go into content, it's the file path is content, characters, player, parts, uniform, and then you'll have NFL and expansion. So you've got all the NFL teams there, and then all the expansion teams there. Now, in the expansion section, you also have some of the college teams that have been in previous Maddens, which is just EA being lazy and not taking them out of the game. I think those college teams were used for face of the franchise. So that's how you find it. You can. I think you were asking about Florida. So I found that if you type in Florida, you take off the A, and then again uniforms expansion, North Florida Keys, that's the made up team, and then you've got the one set of jerseys from 2019. Now if we pull up this, here is a list of all the textures and some of the presets for the jerseys. Now for the time being, don't change the presets. That's far more in depth. That's like if you want to move around where the numbers sit on the jersey and things like that, but that takes a lot more trial and error. So if we focus on just these texture assets, we can see that we've got jerseys. So you've got the white jersey, the blue jersey, and then you've got what we call the color, which is that, the RSM, which effectively gives it the lighting, and then the norm, which is essentially the shape of the jersey itself. So you can see for the difference there that this is just the color that sits on top, but you can see that the sort of the nameplate on the back and the shape of the jersey. So it's essentially the mold that the texture file sits on top of. So we want to always keep these three together. This texture file for the jersey, you've obviously got the shirt and you've got the sleeves, and then two sets of various left and right sleeves there as well. Now I'll show you how to determine which ones are which, but you want to keep those sections there and there as similar to these as possible. Otherwise, your players are going to have various different changes to their jersey. So all we would do is hit the export button, put it into a file in your computer, and try and keep them as structured as possible so that you don't lose files. Now the helmet was one that you were talking about as well. So let's find the helmet. We'll just type in helmet there to make our lives easier. So the helmet comes with two different assets, texture assets per helmet. So if we just stuck with these two here, so you get the color, which is a PNG file. So essentially that would be blank underneath. So I'll show you how in Photoshop how we can put color behind that. And then you also have these stickers here, so you have the American flag and a warning as well. So yeah, I'd export all of these into a Windows Explorer folder, and then essentially we'll take those and then edit them in Photoshop in another video, and then we will then import them into Blender so that we can see how they look without having to go into the game and then coming out to make slight variations. So I think that would be the end of the first video. There was another bit that I forgot, which was the numbers. So let's get rid of all of these. So if we go into jersey, find Florida, right. Under 2019, you will see two subfolders. So there's font slices and number slices. Now the fonts are the letters on the back, so for the names, and the number slices, obviously the numbers at the front and back. Now, when we look at these, we can see the individual numbers, like so. However, unlike the jerseys and all the other files where you just literally export, make the changes, import them back in, the numbers work slightly differently. And what you have to do is, instead of changing them individually like that, you have to go into the array, so the texture array asset, and then you find the number there. Now the difference in how you can tell is that at the top right you get this term slice. If you click into that, that'll have 0, 1, all the way down to 9. And again, all you need to do is export and then choose a folder, and then it will export the numbers 0 to all the way through to 9, and then you can edit them. If you didn't like this particular font of number, I guess you could call it, then I'll show you how to replace these with other numbers. So you can either use numbers from other teams. So one set of numbers that I think are really cool and unusual are in Oregon. So I think these are kind of cool. So realistically, all you need to do is export them out, import them back into another team, and then you would, if you so wished, you could have the Florida team with the Oregon numbers. So that's how we change the letters and numbers, and the font slices are exactly the same. Ignore all the individual texture assets, and then you want to go into the array. And the reason for that is that even though there are 26 letters, there are also slightly smaller letters and things like commas and apostrophes and things of that nature. So again, export, the whole thing will come out, and then you just individually change the letters and then import them all back in as one. So yeah, that's how we do numbers and letters. Alright, so in the second video, I wanted to show you what we do with our jerseys and our other textures once we've exported them. Now I'm sure there are other videos which will detail this much better than I will. I'm by no means like a YouTuber or any good at tutorials, but this is how I do it. There are two distinct ways that we can mod textures, and one is significantly more user-friendly than the other. So if we look at this file, this is what we've exported from the FIFA editor, and this is the Florida jersey, obviously. Now, if we wanted to, we could just use the paint fill tool and go in and change the color as we sort of fit. Right, so, but that is a very down and dirty way of getting the job done. I would only use this if I was looking to make very quick changes just to see what it would look like. I certainly wouldn't be using this as a texture that I would use in game. I think there are better ways to do it, and I'll show you why. If you go into the norm, we zoom in here, you can obviously see the outline of like things like the nameplate and the neck and the shoulders and the shoulder stripes, and you've got the logo there, the Jordan brand, the 2021. Now these things aren't separate layers, so that we can't move them around as we'd like. Now, to show you very quickly, let's say you wanted that Jordan logo there, which is almost like embossed or imprinted, and you wanted it to sit, I don't know, here instead. You could copy, paste a new layer, put it in there, but now you've got two Jordan logos, and when you look at the shirt in game, you would have two imprints, so you'd have to go back to that layer, copy that section, and then sort of replace it like that. So it does work, it just doesn't look great, in my opinion. There are better ways of doing it. So there is an Ultimate Jersey Photoshop file, which I can send to you. That's not a problem. And what this has is a wide variety of things that you can use. Now, I know that there's a website being created which will have all this content, which you can just make on a website, but if you just want to do it on Photoshop instead, then this is how we do it. So you've got, within here, you've got logos, so you've got everything from the NFL, you've got throwbacks, you've got XFL, CFL, Italian leagues, you've just got a ton of logos that you to use in there. So for example, like, let's see what I can find here. So if we click the Italian FL, you get different logo there instead of the NFL. We type in, I think, what's in here, the CFL, so I guess that would be the Canadian League. Yeah, just loads of different options in there. So that's the logos. You've also got the branding. So I think here you've got like the Nike swoosh there and there. You've got Adidas, you've got Under Armour, you've got the Jordan brand as well, and it's already placed as to where they're needed, which is fantastic. You've also got like neck options. You've got shoulder options, which you can play around with to find out which ones you want to use. Jersey itself, you get like Pro Bowl spokes, all these different options for you to go through. Like I said, I'm sure that there are better tutorials out there, but this is what I would use. You've also got various different normal files as well. So if you want the Adidas one, or the Jordan brand, or the Nike, or the alternative Nike ones, and then you can start building your texture file on top of these. And the way you do that is you just use the norm on and off and go into your base. And then under jersey color, you've got the color overlay. So let's say we wanted to start building a Florida Gators uniform. We've got this blue color here, which we use with the eyedropper tool. I would copy this number, this hex number for the color, then go into color overlay, click in that grey box there, change that hex color, and then done. So you don't have to worry about the parameters of the paint fill tool or anything like that. Just makes things so much easier. It does take some time, rather than using the paint fill just like on the on the jersey to change the colour, but I think it just looks better and it does save time. So that's how we do that. You were mentioning earlier about the helmet. So if we go down here, click into this. So the helmet itself obviously has all the colours and the icons in place, which is great. But if we wanted to change the colour from just being clear and being able to see it in Blender, we have to create a new layer. So there's a little plus sign in a box here. Make sure layer 2 is underneath and call it something like base color. Cool. And then hide that layer, select base layer color, and then let's just use the Florida. In fact, what color is that? So that's blue. So let's just say, for example, we wanted to use a grey color. I don't know why. I'm just making it on the fly. So that's our grey color, and then everything would sit on top. Highlight both those layers, merge them into one, and then you've got your grey. And then what I would do is, if we just forget about the ultimate jersey from mod for a minute, go in and change all these grey colours, make like a grey out jersey. That could be fun. In the pants section, same concept. So you just have to be a bit careful, because you can see, like, if you're not too careful, like the paint fill will go into the logos as well. If that happens, you can change the tolerance. There we go, that solves that. Control S, that saves it as a PNG. We'll do the numbers in a second. Keep the norm the same, the RSM the same. Save that. And the helmet saved as well, so that's great. And I'll show you how we import them into Blender so we can see what they look like once we've done our edits. Now, you were also talking about numbers. So when we get the array out, if you just take like the number 1 that we've already exported from Fifa Editor, if you Control A, that selects everything. Control C to copy, and then Control V to paste, and then Control T, you can move it around as you wish. Now, this is only for sort of decorative purposes. So once you've placed it, that's all well and good. But if you were to save this or import this back into the Fifa Editor, you would have the number 1 on the jersey, and then whichever number your player is using would be on top of it, and it would look really rubbish. But this is just so we can see what it would look like in game. So we have that number 1. If we wanted to edit this, again, the same principles apply. You just use the magic wand tool, and you can select various different layers. The stitching within here doesn't highlight as well as it could, so you've got to get kind of creative about how to create a new layer of that and then put a stitching template on top. I tend to ignore it. I don't like the stitching on it, but it's just up to you really. For example, this slightly different font is much easier to work with because you can highlight the internal one, or the border, I guess you'd call it. So if we wanted to slightly change the colours of this, for example, just hit the paint fill tool. Actually, the tolerance is pretty naff on that, so let's kick that up a touch. So okay, so that's now a grey one. Control S to save, Control A to highlight, Control C to copy. Let's get rid of that layer there. Control V. Grayed out number. I don't know. Doesn't look great. Maybe it needs to be a different colour, but we'll keep it for where it is for the time being, just to illustrate. And then merge these layers, and then hit Control S to save it. So at this point, we've edited the pants, we've edited the jersey, we've edited the helmet. So the next video will be on Blender and essentially how we see those to make the adjustments before we put them in game. I hope that helps. Okay, third video. Let's talk about Blender. So I have Blender 3.6, which you can download for free, and I will send you, if you don't already have it, the unimodel.fbx file. I can put it on Google Drive or something. So when you open up Blender, you will get this box. So we highlight that and delete. And the reason we're using Blender, as I said before, is because we want a better way than having to go in and out of the game in order to see the changes that we've made. This is a better way to see your mods and effectively make changes on the fly. So we go File, Import, FBX, and then the unimodel id.fbx. Great. Now we've got these three different models, and the only difference is the sleeve size, and that refers to the 2D texture image that I showed you earlier, because they've got three different alternate sleeve sizes, which is why we have to be very careful, make sure that they look as similar as possible. If we go into Texture Paint, the initial files come with the San Francisco 49ers tops, so we need to be able to change those. If we go into the Shading tab, this is effectively what we want. Now, when you highlight different versions, you can effectively change different parts. So if we start with the pants, you will have at the bottom some maps, which is where you're importing your files from. So if we go into map 3 here, you can see that it's connected color to base color, which is what we want. So if you go into the folder, and then find the grey Florida pants, then we can change them. Fantastic. And then the same process for the shirt, so highlight the shirt, go find your folder, change your shirts. Great. I'm sure that there must be a way to change all these ones individually, and then you can show like your home, away, alternate kit, but I think the best way to do it is like this. And then the helmet, so highlight the helmet. And then there we go. So we've got the grayed out unimodel. You've also got the number 1, which we edited slightly for placement purposes. As I said in the last video, this is just for illustration, so you see what it will look like in game. You don't want to be leaving this on when you import it into the FIFA editor, otherwise the 1 will show underneath the actual numbers, and it will look wrong. So that's effectively how we do this. Now, for some of these logos, when you're putting them on the 2D textures, they're obviously going on flat. Whereas if you remember, like, they look slightly warped on the 2D textures, and that's because obviously they're on a 3D model. So I've got another video in my YouTube channel which shows you how to use the Stencil tool. I'm just wondering if I could do that real quick. Yeah, it's in another video. I think the best way to do that is probably use that video instead. There is a stencil. Oh yeah, so you come down here, you're looking for your texture, so let's open that up and find my texture. So let's take this. Okay, so this FTBL, the football Nike logo, right? So if we go hit N, view, clip start to 0.001, and then the number 3, number 1, we can take this stencil here, and if we press Control and the right, we can move it around, or if you hit Shift right key, you can change the size of it. So let's just make it relatively small. Let's put it there. Now, I'm not suggesting this is going to look great, but we'll do it. Now, if we look at the texture file here, you can see that 2021 is slightly offset, and the logo there is slightly offset. So what we want to do is tab don't need to be in. Okay, so if you go to this tool icon here and you go down, you'll get Stencil, Image Aspect, make sure that's highlighted as well, and then using the left mouse button, you can click over it. There we go. So once you've clicked all over it, it will then put it on this texture file as well. And then if you wanted to, you can copy this and then save it and then import it. So for some of these custom logos, I would be more inclined to use the stencil method in order to get it on accurately, as opposed to just trying to copy and paste the logo directly into the Photoshop file. Apologies, that took a little extra time, but you just need to make sure your settings are correct. So the tool settings, you need to make sure that you've got the texture file open there, and that your mapping is in Stencil, and then you've clicked the image aspects as well. And then when you go into this checkered texture properties tab, again, make sure the PNG is in there, and then it's highlighted, and then use Control or Shift to change the aspect and rotate, and then the left click to go over it. And then as you see, you can see that night tick is like straight there, but on this file it's warped. So essentially that is how we modify the textures in Blender, and then when we go back into the shading, we can see where those textures lay out. Okay, cool. I hope these 3 videos really help, and any questions, just let me know.